Good evening all. As part of the Northern Stories event this evening, we will reflect on and celebrate an event that put Townsville on the map, literally. And I've been invited to talk about this floating hotel, to share this story with you. Now, a good story, as you probably know, should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. This story of Townsville's fabulous floating hotel has two beginnings, a middle, and no end yet. It also has an exciting cast of characters and a plot with plenty of twists and turns. Once you've heard it, I think you'll agree it's a very good story. Please join me on reflecting what happened. Let's start on the two beginnings. The first beginning was in the year 1952 when someone called Dr. the son of Italian immigrants and a young man with big ideas, arrived in Townsville. Next one, please. And there you see him. As an avid diver, Doug was eager to share his passion for the Great Barrier Reef with those who could not visit it in person. After obtaining coral harvesting rights, he opened Taka's Coral Gardens in 1967. Now, where that was on the same spot where the Telstra building now is in South Townsville. Next one, please. How many of you remember the Coral Gardens and fluorescent displays of corals delighted visitors for many, many years? You could even purchase novelty items made from coral. The next one, please. Now, in 1983, Doug went a step further, launching ReefLink to ferry day trippers to Townsville, to John Brewer Reef, by means of a high-speed catamaran called ReefLink 1, to snorkel and dive on the reef itself. Now, some of you may have done that trip in your lifetime, 1983 to 1988. But that still was not enough for Doug. He wanted to go a step further. For some time, the oil industry had been developing offshore floating accommodation for their oil rig workers. Okay, why not create a one-of-a-kind floating luxury hotel so the people could stay overnight on the reef and experience the reef at leisure? Next one, please. For a while, Doug Tarker toyed with the concept of mooring old ocean liners at John Brewer Reef. It was abandoned, it was not very practical, too expensive, and think about all the environmental approvals he had to get. It was only a couple of years later that the idea of a floating hotel became a reality. Now, another beginning in 1982, when King Carl XVI's Gustav of Sweden, that's Swedish royalty, on an official state visit to Australia, visited the Henderson shipyard near Fremantle. Next one. Here he is. The shipyard was building a floating dormitory for oil rig workers on the northwest shelf in Western Australia. Now, the king was very interested because a Swedish company called Consafe Engineering was a contractor for the project. Consafe had already built similar accommodations for the oil and gas industry in the North Sea, and they're called floatels, floating hotels. And this is one of them, built at Consafe's facility in Singapore in 1983. Next one. Doesn't look very much like a floating hotel, but watch what happened later. So King Carl Gustav put a simple but direct question to the Australian project manager, a man named John Parker. Could Consafe please get more contracts to build flotels for Australia? It was almost like a royal command, don't you think so? The two beginnings were about to get together. Now we get to the middle. As it happened, John Parker worked with a construction company, John Holland, on a project in Canberra. He met one of the company's employees was a gentleman called Sam Tarker, who was Doug Tarker's brother. And he spoke about his brother's idea to build a floating hotel on John Brewer Reef. It would be a big step up from an oil dormitory. 1984, John Parker met with Doug Tarker in Townsville, and they went out on ReefLink 1 to inspect the proposed site. Next one. And here you see where is John Brewer Reef. It's about 70 kilometers north of Townsville, east of Great Palm Island. And most of you probably know that is one of the sites for the Museum of Underwater Art as well. So the story carries on in a certain while. 1986, after many discussions with banks, investors, lawyers, designers, and engineers, They visited the reef again with a representative from Consafe and 2 engineers from the shipyard in Singapore that was going to build the hotel. The next one. And here you see all the gentlemen in a very, very little, very small tinny. And Doug Targ is saying the hotel will be built there. Quite an interesting slide, by the way. Construction took place in Singapore at Bethlehem Shipyard with a Consafe design team based there as well. Next one. The shipyard, which still exists, had been established in 1970 as a subsidiary company of Bethlehem Steel of Pennsylvania, United States of America. Specialized in building oil rigs, so obviously that would be the perfect company to build a floating hotel. As the design evolved, various models of the proposed hotel were created. This is the one in our Maritime Museum. Next one, which you can see for yourself, which was restored by one of our volunteers. This is one of the original models. It was donated to us in the 1990s. It's now part of our Doug Tarker exhibition, which I hope you will see one day. The reported costs of building the hotel was anything between $40 and $55 million. Was a lot of money for those days. Australian dollars, that is. And here's the nearly completed hotel at Bethlehem Shipyard in Singapore. The next one, on a pontoon called John Brewer. Moving the finished hotel 5,000 kilometers from Singapore to John Brewer Reef was our mission. Next one. So it was positioned on top of a huge semi-submersible heavy lift ship, the Mighty Servant 3, transported to the reef. And in order to withstand tropical cyclones, the hotel was moored to no less than 7 huge anchors inside the lagoon after being very carefully maneuvered inside the lagoon of John Brewer Reef. The hotel itself was called the Floater, or the Floating Hotel, but its real name was Four Seasons Barrier Reef Resort, a very, very long name. And in March 1988, the hotel opened its doors with a lot of publicity and fanfare. Next one, please. And here you can see all the press reports of those days. Now, how did you get there? Most guests arrived via another high-speed catamaran called Reef Link 2, which could carry up to 400 passengers at the top speed of 32 knots. Was a real big guy. Next one. Or they could come by helicopter. There was a helipad next to the hotel. The 7-story structure had 176 rooms and could accommodate 350 guests. It was a 5-star facility. And I do know, I've met people who actually stayed at the hotel or worked there, who actually were there on opening night, and they said it was a fantastic experience. What will now see are some grainy images taken from a video produced by Doug Tarker's son Peter Tarker in 1988. This video is on show at the Maritime Museum. Now here's the lobby area that would have greeted you on arrival. Next one. After checking in, you could freshen up in your deluxe room. Next one. For fine dining, head to one of the hotel's 2 restaurants. Next one. They served everything from light snacks to sumptuous buffets and featured the culinary skills of a master chef from Europe. And if you wanted to dance the night away, there was a hotel disco called the Boiler Room. Next one. Here you are, inside the pontoon. Other activities included a floating fence and tennis court, and I think most of the balls ended up floating on the Pacific anyway. Tennis court on the ocean, a bit of a funny idea. A gym and a sauna and a library with books and board games. There were even conference rooms. Plenty of outdoor activities there were. So swimming, snorkeling, diving, feeding the fish. Next one. Here you can see a lot of people having fun in the sun, swimming in the lagoon. No worries if you forgot to bring sunscreen or your swim fins. The hotel even had a dive shop and a gift shop to meet all your needs. And there was another vessel called the Yellow Submarine. It was officially it was called the Manta. It was named after the Beatles song "We All Live in a Yellow Submarine." So here you have the Yellow Submarine, the next one, which was designed and built by Doug Tarker in South Townsville, where you could sit in comfort below the waterline and look at fish and more fish and the reef. It's better than a glass-bottom boat. Staff who worked at the hotel had fond memories of working there, staff parties, flying pizzas in all the way from Townsville with a helicopter. That's great, almost like a Domino's pizza service. Although it was Doug Tarker's brainchild, he was not involved with the development and management. Sadly, it was not a commercial success. It was a bit far away, and many people got stranded if they want to go back to the airport. If there was rough weather, the catamaran didn't go, the helicopter didn't go. There was bad weather, insufficient marketing, it was an expensive place to go, an airline strike, high operating costs and others. In 1989, only a year after opening the reef, the floating hotel closed down and was sold to a company in Vietnam. Next one. There it is. It left John Brewer Reef on top of another ship, as it was moored in the Saigon River. Vietnam had rebounded after the disastrous Vietnam War, and they were keen to get tourists in. So they were looking for a ready-made hotel, which the floating hotel at John Brewer Reef was ideal. It could just put brought there, moored in the Saigon River, and was opened. So the locals called it the floater, and it was a popular light spot for almost a decade. However, in 1998, the hotel had once again run into financial difficulties. Now here comes the interesting bit. In 1998, the floating hotel was sold to North Korea and relocated for the third time, another 5,000 kilometers or so, to the Mount Kumgang Resort in North Korea. It was renamed Hotel Haem Kumgang. And can have the next one. And here it was when Kim Jong-il was in charge. He wanted to boost tourism, and he allowed the South Korean company to construct resort and hotel facilities. And there you can see the floating hotel looks very different than John Brewer Reef, of course. In 2008, everything closed down because North Korean security guards shot at tourists. So, end of tourism. Can I have the next one, please? And everybody knows that guy. That's Kim Jong-un. And that's our own floating hotel right behind him. In October 2019, Kim Jong-un visited the resort, which was rather run down, and criticized for being shabby and backward in architecture. He announced that all the facilities, including the floating hotel, would be demolished and redeveloped. So that seemed like the end of the floating hotel, but in January 2020, the hotel got a reprieve when they postponed the demolition because of the coronavirus pandemic. Next one. If you want to Google it, there you can see it very clear on Google Earth. It's still sitting there, quite fuzzy, but that is the floating hotel in North Korea, as it is now. Well, whatever its the essential fate, the fabulous floating hotel has a legacy of which to be proud, and a lot of other floating hotels followed around the world. Can I have the next one, please? They look much more posh, much more advanced. But of course, most of today's floating hotels are called cruise ships. Same concept, the only thing is it just moves around from spot to spot. So our floating hotel has another important legacy. It had to meet very strict environmental standards because it was bang in the middle of the Great Barrier Reef. After the hotel was in place, divers successfully transplanted more than 300 pieces of coral. Next one, please. And here you can see all sewage and liquid waste was treated, sterilized water was pumped outside the reef, trash was incinerated. So Townsville's fabulous floating hotel set an example for ecotourism that was ahead of its time. The next one. So that's what we not only reflecting tonight, but also celebrating. Now, ReefLink stopped operating in 1989 and was replaced by a ferry service. Doug Tarker passed away in 1993. His ashes were scattered at John Brewer Reef, very fitting, and a memorial to him, sculpted in the shape of a coral bombing, and sits next to the museum in Neville George Maritime Park. And the next one, that is the Doug Tarker Memorial at the tip of the Maritime Park in South Townsville. Here we are. Do you think it was a good story? It's a story with a beginning, two beginnings, a middle, and not an end yet. Next one. And here are some people who made this all possible. This presentation was not my work. It was put together by two of my volunteers. And there's heaps of people, and they still come forward with information and more information. These are just some of them. Now, on display is the story of the floating hotel in the museum and many other things Doug did. You can also learn more at our website. Okay, the next one, please, the last one. So, thank you for coming to listening to this very interesting, unusual story. And thank you for celebrating the things and events in the past and in the present which made and make Townsville a really great place to be. Have a good evening.